1. So a couple of months ago, me and my family of 4 plus 2 dogs moved house from living in a village to living in a small old farmhouse. The new house is a 10-minute drive from the nearest town, so it's not too far. But it is one of 2 houses in the area. The other house's occupants were in the process of moving out, so they were rarely home. With hardly anything surrounding it apart from fields, one tucked-away house, and one road connecting us to the town. A few days after officially moving there and unpacking most of our stuff, my parents had to go out to work. Their jobs usually mean that on weekdays, I have to wait until they finish work for them to pick me up and drive me home. On weekends, this means I stay home unbothered until around evening when my parents get home or my brother wakes up. He usually sleeps for 16 hours at a time due to his crowded schedule or something. On this particular weekend, my parents decided that after work they were going to visit a friend's house on the other side of the area. My brother was home, but he was determined to stay asleep and told me not to bother him under any circumstance. So basically I had the house to myself for the whole day with no jobs or work to do, apart from walk the dogs and stuff. Anyway, so around 6 in the afternoon, it was already getting dark outside. Not so dark that you couldn't see anything, but dark enough that anything you could see was basically just a silhouette with vague features. I was watching YouTube in my room upstairs when I saw the headlights of a car slowly making their way down the very long road towards our house. My first thought was that something was wrong, but then I realized the car was probably for the one other house next to ours, whose occupants were just moving out, coming to collect their stuff or something. Due to me not thinking much of the car, I just continued watching YouTube. Not even 2 minutes later, I hear my youngest dog sounding off downstairs. I instantly get the worst vibe I've felt in a long time, so I decided the best course of action would be to go downstairs and investigate what was causing my dog to bark. Since no one had been downstairs since the morning, all of the lights were turned off and it was dark apart from a few lamps in the living room. When I got downstairs, I looked to see where the dog was barking. At the window, my dog had stopped barking as much since I was there now. But just to make sure everything was fine, I looked out the window to see what the cause of his distress was. When I opened the curtains enough so that I could get a clear look out the window, I saw a car still running, sitting in front of my garden. It took me a quick second in the dark to also notice that the front gate to my garden was open. My garden is surrounded by a low stone wall with a wooden fence on a latch. I then realized that a man I had never seen before was standing just beyond the open gate, surveying the house, looking through the upstairs windows, presumably for human activity. I stared in bewilderment at this person for what felt like a really long moment before he turned and looked in the window that I was staring out of. We locked eyes for about 3 seconds. He looked as shocked as I was. Moments later, he started running towards the car, and in my shock, I didn't know what to do but run upstairs and get my brother. By then, the dogs had made enough noise to wake my brother up, so I ran into his room and frantically yelled at him to come downstairs and look. By the time I managed to get him downstairs, the car had turned around and was just pulling away. The road outside my house leads to a dead end, and it's really hard to turn around, as there isn't much space. It usually takes a minute. We saw the car speed off down the driveway, and we just stood in shock for a while before any of us spoke. We decided I should call our parents and tell them to come home and explain what happened. After around another hour, both my parents were home, and neither of them believed me, brushing it off as probably just someone lost, and told me there was no need to call the police, so I felt really dumb for a while. Fast forward about 3 days. I was in school talking to my friends, and I found out that on the exact night this occurred, there had been a string of serial robberies around the area. Many isolated farmhouses were hit. Since then, I've started locking the front door even in the daytime, and I have a panic every time my dogs start barking or I see a car coming towards the house. 2. This took place about 7 years ago. I had been single for a very long time. My kids kept telling me to get back into the swing of things, but I just kept making excuses. My nephew told me about this dating site. He said there was no harm in talking to people, so I did it. I put everything out there so there were no surprises when or if they met me. I thought that if they still contacted me after reading all I had described about myself, and we matched, Then maybe I would have coffee with them. Well, I matched with a few, and the conversation went well. I met with one gentleman who was way too regimental for my crazy life, and kindly declined any more involvement with him. Another guy seemed too pushy and acted like I should be honored to be in his presence. But then there came... we'll call him Richard. Now, please keep in mind, I had very low self-esteem at the time. That being said, Richard seemed great. We carried on conversations for hours. He lived an hour and a half away, so all we could really do was talk to each other. We talked about our kids, dreams, goals. My daughter even friended one of his sons on Facebook. I was a secretary for some self-help meetings in my town, and he was going to school to be a counselor. Perfect, right? We talked for at least 4 months, but after a while I noticed that he kept having small problems come up. Arguments with his mom with whom he was living, no money for gas, his truck broke down, his oldest boy was mad at him. Just little things, you know. Not anything that would set me off, but it was his poor me to heck with it attitude. I tried to let that go, and really be a positive influence in his life. His mother and boys loved me and told me they had never seen him so happy. Time went on and we were still talking every day. I had an opportunity to come see him. And of course my daughter went with me so she could meet his son in person as well. I took him and his son out to eat at the only little coffee shop in that town. He knew I was on a fixed income, but I paid anyway because he was going to school and didn't have an income as of yet. We had a good time. We met at his son's house on a hilltop town. We were having such a good time that we didn't notice that the snow was coming down hard and the roads were icing up, so my daughter and I stayed the night in one of the rooms. It seemed like the closer we got to his family, the more distant they became from him. It was odd. The next day the roads were clear, so we said our goodbyes and went home. But before we left, I received one extra hug from his son's mother-in-law. She whispered in my ear, "Don't fall for him." I thought that maybe there was something she didn't like about me. That came out of left field. The next few days we didn't talk. I thought that was odd. Did I do something wrong? Someone from the self-help meeting told me that there was a man looking for me. She said he looked disheveled and smelled like alcohol. This wasn't a surprise to me, because I had helped quite a few people get back on their feet, and maybe this one fell off the wagon and just needed to talk. As I was driving down my street, I saw a truck in my driveway. I didn't recognize it first. It was him. He found out where I lived and was sitting in front of my house. At first, I was happy, until I looked in his truck and saw him slumped over, reeking of booze. At that point, my fix mode set in, and I asked him in for some strong coffee. He told me that he had a blowout with his mother, and she kicked him out and his boys won't talk to him. I got him some clean clothes and told him to take a shower. I figured we could sort it out the next day. In the meantime, I was taking him to a meeting. He sobered up and agreed to go. The whole time at the meeting, my friends were acting like I had lost my mind. Did they see something I was blind of? We went back to my house and he seemed okay, almost too okay, like nothing at all had happened. My son pulled me aside and told me he didn't like him much, but I thought maybe he was just being overprotective. I should have paid attention. We went to the store because I wasn't prepared for the extra mouth, and I bought 4 2-liters of soda, a gallon of milk, and 2 monsters for him and my son, some chips and stuff for dinner. After we ate, we all watched some TV and headed off to bed. I let him sleep on the spare bed in my room, but in the middle of the night he tried to get frisky. At that point, no, my grown kids were in the other room, and something just didn't sit well with me. Like he wasn't the same man he was before. The next morning, my daughter came running out of the bathroom angry. She said in a loud voice, "Someone pissed all over the toilet." He didn't say a word. Later, we were all eating breakfast, and he started to let food drop out of his mouth onto the table and floor, and was spitting food while he was talking. He took 3 2-liters and drank them back to back, letting some run down his chin. What the hell? Then, yes, there is more, he took the remote and started to set recordings for his favorite shows, deleting a few of my grandchildren's. Recordings set for weeks in advance. Wait, what are you doing, my friend? This is not cool, I told him. But he acted like I said nothing. Then he went to the refrigerator and told me I had to go to the store to buy more soda and stuff. It was all gone. Like, it was gone. He even drank my son's monster and a whole gallon of milk. At this point, my daughter was also livid. So she contacted his son, and he proceeded to tell her that his mom kicked him out because he wouldn't get a job and was stealing money and eating her out of house and home. His other son won't talk to him because he keeps asking for money and won't pay it back. He himself was mad at him for lying to me and telling me that he was going to school when he wasn't, and using me as his next big meal ticket. Well, that was it. I got all his stuff together and took it to his truck and asked him to leave. It doesn't end there. He had loosened some bolts on his transmission, making it impossible to move. He begged and pleaded me for him to stay. It was at the point snot was coming out of his nose. Good God. He said that he just wanted to be close to me, and if that meant sleeping in his truck, he would do that and he couldn't live without me. Well, hell to the no. I called his oldest son and told them that if they didn't come with a tow truck and get their dad, his fate was not going to be nice. They arrived 2 hours later apologizing for their father's actions. We found out through his son that for many years he had gone through many unhealthy relationships and took advantage of a lot of women that fell for his lies. He still tries to friend me on Facebook to this day. 3. I'm 20 years old and a front desk agent at a mid-range hotel in a small East Coast city. I'm a full-time student at the university and live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood made up of mostly college students. At the hotel, I've had to deal with a fair amount of unpleasant or crazy people, since a young woman in a customer service job seems like an easy target. I was used to old ladies yelling at me or inappropriately aged men making remarks on my appearance like, "You just have the most adorable smile," or, "I'm sure you're a heartbreaker," and I've usually been able to deflect. When I work on weekdays, I'm always on the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, where we handle check-ins. It was a slow night, where we only had 28 check-ins to deal with, and by 8 p.m. my coworker Mindy and I had done all our tasks and were leaning over the front desk chatting and watching the news, which blared perpetually from the TVs in the lobby's breakfast area. We only had a handful of check-ins left, so we had kicked back with our deck of cards and Chinese takeout all over the desk. A younger man checked in, and I remember thinking he was cutish but definitely looked Republican. He had neat blonde hair, a boyish smile, and a weak chin, and was wearing khakis and a quarter-zip fleece. We had a pretty regular interaction, save for him making a lot of eye contact and smiling, and he went to his room. About half an hour later, he came back down and asked us where he could get alcohol. We told him the convenience store across the street had beer and wine, and he and I joked a little about how it was closing soon, so he had better run there. When he came back, he slid a 40-ounce across the desk towards me. With my customer service smile of vague cluelessness, I said, "What's this?" "It's for you." He leaned against the desk. Front desk agents have to stand up, so the top tier of the desk was about chest height, and when he leaned over, he was right in my face. "Oh, I can't drink right now, but thank you. I think you should be the one to enjoy that." He was insistent, and I agreed I would take it to drink after work, and went into the office to put it with Mindy's stuff. She'd appreciate the free alcohol, but I didn't feel good about drinking a 40 from some too friendly guy. He hung around the desk for a while. Mindy is the type of person who can keep someone talking for hours, even if they don't want to, because her brain never runs out of content, and she treats everyone like she's known them for years. This meant that this guy, who I'll call Mr. Hanson, wasn't leaving anytime soon. They were talking about politics, and I heard him throw around some vaguely conservative rhetoric, but I pretended to be engrossed in my homework. He kept glancing over at me and trying to smile, but it was getting late, my feet hurt, and all I wanted was to be at home in my underwear, rolling a spliff with my cats all around me, instead of allowing some 35-year-old guy to think he could flirt. At one point, Mindy had to take a phone call, so he slid down the desk toward me. I looked up with my customer service smile back on. "So, go to a small liberal arts college, do you?" My uniform shirt was short-sleeved, so you could see a couple tattoos on my arm, and I have a nose piercing, so I assumed that and the music theory homework I was working on informed his guess. "No, I go to the local university." The city's main attraction, besides its hippies and breweries, was my college, a pretty good state school, so it was somewhat surprising he didn't assume I went there instead. He was sizing me up, and I prayed that Mindy would be done with her phone calls soon. But it was her long-distance boyfriend, and she had wandered into the back office to talk to him. He started talking about his experiences at his southern university, about how he was a veteran, but got injured so he lived off pension or something, and didn't work and was just touring New England right now. The conversation somehow turned to his love life, but I'm pretty sure I was so spaced out by that point, thinking about how I was going to eat at least an entire frozen pizza when I got home, that I didn't pay attention to what he was saying until it was clear he had asked me a question. "Would you do that?" he asked. "Would I do what? Get freaked out because I don't work? A lot of the chicks I date think it's weird." I remember exactly what he said because I thought it was weird he called girls chicks, and how he spat it out. I laughed nervously and said, "I don't know, I don't think so." The hotel was on the smaller side, and I was very aware of the fact that Mindy and I were the only employees in the building right then. He began to ask me probing questions about my love life along the lines of, "Are you single? No. Well, why do you like him? Would you like him if he moved away? Do you think you'll be with him a long time?" The last question freaked me out, and I wish I had asked him to stop asking me personal questions like that. But I'm polite to a fault even when I'm not working. So I kept smiling and laughing and giving friendly but impersonal answers. "You're very warm," he told me. "Have you ever worked with kids?" He talked about how a lot of the girls he dates, back wherever he was from, Ohio maybe, are shallow and materialistic, and how I seemed like such a down-to-earth girl, and I was such a cutie, and did I know about the girl next door trope? "I'm like the girl next door, but cool," he told me. I imagine he was referring to my tattoos again. At this point, I was physically queasy and uncomfortable, but couldn't disengage. Guest reviews are hugely important in the hospitality business, so at this hotel we're strictly trained to let guests treat you however they want. You just can't upset them. It would probably have been reasonable at this point to ask him to leave the front desk, but I felt so helpless, and being assertive with people at work is so against my instinct that it didn't even cross my mind to say anything. Because of this, I had to stay there listening to this guy and politely accepting his compliments. I assumed he typically got away with it since he was attractive and clean-cut with a slight baby face. I kept praying for the phone to ring, or for someone to ask me to perform some sort of complicated and long task, so I could get away, but the only time it did was when a neighboring hotel called to ask if we had printer ink. Mindy was on the phone in the back until eventually Sam, our night auditor, arrived, and I realized that this guy had monopolized the entire last 2 hours of my shift, trying to get me to sleep with him and or admit I secretly supported Trump. No. Hoping Mr. Hanson would take this as a cue to leave, I went into the office and got my coat and backpack. When I came back out to witness Sam count the drawer, Mr. Hanson was still standing there. "Well, I hope you have a good night," I said to him. "Are you walking out this way?" He gestured down the hallway, which led to all of the rooms as well as the door to the back parking lot. I told him I had parked out front, which thankfully was true, and was able to get to my car successfully. I sat there for a while, responding to the texts that had piled up on my phone while Mr. Hanson was diverting my attention. It was about a 10-minute drive from the hotel to my apartment downtown, and I noticed that a car was pulling out of the parking lot at the same time I was. It wasn't Mindy's car. She always stayed an extra half hour after her shift technically ended, but there was another hotel next door, so I assumed it was an employee or a guest there. I wasn't too concerned when the Nissan was right behind me, but I noticed it had Florida plates, which a lot of rental cars around here do. I take a weird way to get across town after work, which involves cutting through the university hospital's enormous, needlessly complex parking lot, which spans about 3 blocks. It wasn't necessarily a quicker route, but I liked how there were never any cars there this time of night, and I could go as fast as I wanted to in a Subaru Outback, so not in a cool way. The parking lot, as I said, is needlessly complex, which means stoplights, which all turn into blinking yellows after 9 p.m., medians in grassy areas placed seemingly at random, and a lot of twists and turns, which all go to very specific buildings and exits. I'm explaining this parking lot in so much detail to express how strange it was that this rental car was following me this pretty nonsensical route. It's not a way that any kind of maps app would take you, since there are more straightforward streets surrounding the parking lot. I initially assumed it was someone going to the hospital, since it was the only major medical facility in a 100-mile radius, and the only well-funded one in an even larger area. A lot of people and their families stayed at the hotel who were there for the hospital, so the momentary explanation I gave myself seemed feasible. It was maintaining a polite distance, but it was one of those cars with the ultra-bright LED headlights, which were blinding in my mirrors, so the car was impossible to ignore. It followed me around each turn, and at one point, just to see, I went in a big circle around the south half of the lot. Surely enough, the other car made the same circle. My explanation, which was already crumbling, dissolved completely when I drove past the entrances to both the main hospital and the emergency room. Steady consumption of crime shows, scary movies, and true crime Reddit pages and podcasts have made me a very paranoid person. Serial killers really seem to love college-aged women. So at that point, I picked up that something was probably wrong. I figured I should avoid going back to my real apartment, especially since it's just begging to be broken into, with a lot of windows and a very old front door that opens directly to the outside. Obviously, at this point, I was relatively certain it was Mr. Hansen. Like I said, I'd had guests cross the line before, making me come out from behind the desk to hug them, touching me when I'm straightening up the lobby, asking the front desk to bring up a towel, and answering the door in various states of undress, etc. But I had never been followed or particularly fixated on. A hotel receptionist, even if they're good-looking, is someone you have a couple brief and pleasant interactions with, but you don't really think about them when they're not there. I decided my best bet would be to get back to the hotel. I looked back through the town, the Nissan following at a polite distance. I'll reiterate, he was trying to be as discreet as he could, keeping as far behind as he could, while still keeping me in sight. He wasn't trying to intimidate me so much as, I'm not sure, monitor me. Whatever his reasons, I was still afraid. I abandoned the use of turn signals and sped back to the hotel, calling the hotel along the way and asking Sam if he and possibly the security guard we contracted to patrol the property after 11 p.m. could meet me at the front door. When I arrived back at the hotel, I pulled around to the front, where Sam and the security guard were standing under the awning, while the Nissan hit the gas to the back lot. I explained the situation, and the security guard went out the back door to look for the car and its driver. When he came back, he said he spoke to a preppy blonde guy outside who was coming inside. He said he had just been out to smoke a cigarette and was now returning to his room. Security asked him if he'd seen a Nissan with Florida plates, and he said he hadn't. There wasn't much more we could do at that point. Luckily, I wouldn't be working for a couple of days after Mr. Hansen was set to check out, and we were fully solid that weekend, so he couldn't extend his stay if he wanted to. All guests are asked upon check-in to write down make, model, color, and plate of their vehicle on their registration card, just to confirm. I pulled his reg card. Sure enough, silver Nissan Altima with Florida plates. Here's what he wrote on his TripAdvisor review, edited for privacy. Great stay, room was clean, breakfast was hot, and that's all I can ask for. The best thing about this hotel was the staff, though. I had a lovely time with the two ladies at the front desk. My name, especially a very sweet girl. Hope to be seeing you sooner rather than later. Mr. Hansen, we won't meet because my manager put you on the banned list. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 461. There we go, got a little tongue-tied there. Apologies for any dogs you could hear barking in the background. There was one, presumably a tiny dog, literally just constantly yapping. I don't even know how it managed to breathe, it was going so long. But did what I could to mask the sound, so hopefully it wasn't too bad. Although I must say, I did get a pleasant interruption while recording today. I was on the final story there. I think it was about 3 minutes into it, and I got an urgent knock at the door. Someone's in a hurry. I thought, oh, okay, right. So I went downstairs, put the key in the door and unlock it so they don't run away, while I grabbed a robe to make myself presentable to answer the door. and it was a guy from Sennheiser. Well, not, he was some delivery company, UPS or something like that. I don't know what company it was, but it was delivering something from Sennheiser, the headphone people, because I'd sent my broken pair in to be replaced, and I was very happy to see that they sent me the replacement pair. And sure enough, as they said they would, they'd actually replaced the broken pair with the latest model, so I actually got an upgrade at no extra cost. Well, it was the cost of me sending shipping the old ones in. Only annoying thing is the ones I sent them in were a different colour than what they replaced, but I can't complain too much, because I did compare prices, and these ones to buy new are quite a bit more than the ones they replaced. Which is good, and they've got more features and whatnot. I think it uses USB-C versus the old micro USB. So lots of bells and whistles. Sound quality is about the same. Actually, fit a little bit more comfortable, if I'm being honest. And good. So now I have two very good and working pairs of headphones. I've got my Bose, which are probably the ones I'll get the most use out of, because quite frankly they're a little bit better in terms of sound quality, and the noise cancellation is better as well. But it's good that those ones have at least been replaced with a working pair. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.